Um, well, we are letting people in.
Right.
My guest today is Dr. Adrienne Battle. We are so glad you are here, Director of Metro Nashville Public Schools. Dr. Battle, how you doing?
I'm doing just well today. How are you?
I am good. I'm looking outside. It's beautiful outside. It's sunny. There's snow on the ground. It's melting. I think I can get out of my driveway. I got out yesterday. But anyway, we're so glad you're here. And anyway, the first couple of minutes, we just generally talk. Let me just ask you a couple of questions that, just to make it a little bit more fun and personable. I know you're from here. What do you, when you're not in the 5 seconds a day that you don't have to think about the school system, what do you do for fun?
Oh, wow. In that short amount of time, I definitely enjoy spending as much time as I can with my family. I have two little ones, of course, 1, 3, and one that's 1. And so they demand a lot of my time and attention, but we like to have fun. I was a previous athlete, so I'd like to go for a walk or a jog as often as I can. And whenever I have an extra few minutes, I just like to sit out on the back deck and read and just enjoying being outside.
What do you read? What do you like to read?
You
Don't
know,
tell me like how to be a better school administrator.
those books are always interesting, but in my leisure time, I try my best to pull away from my role as a professional educator. And I tend to be drawn to books that are about areas and spaces that I'm not familiar with. And so I like to just kind of explore and learn something new as I'm engaging in my leisure reading.
There used to be a magazine called Mental Floss. I thought it was a great magazine because it was just a whole magazine full of just different things that I found interesting. Everything from, butterflies to, how they build an airplane or whatever, and it was just, I love stuff like that. Right now I'm reading a book about Ebbets Field. It's really it's just essays about it. And it was about baseball players that played back when Ebbets Field was still in New York. So just an easy read. Well, first of all, I'm glad you have fun with your kids. Did you take them outside during the snow?
They've been out a couple times. So
okay.
Little short increments of about 10 or 15 minutes.
All right. Well, I had a snowball fight yesterday with my neighbors, one of which is a first grader in one of your public schools. And she beat me.
Hey, we've encouraged our students and families to enjoy the snow. It's not often that we would experience what we've experienced this week, but to also be safe. So.
All right, good. Well, it is about 10:04. Dr. Adrienne Battle is our guest today, the Director of Metro Nashville Public Schools. We're so glad you're here. We have a number of folks on, a big number, and you won the contest so far, which is, we've done this for a year. You got more questions in advance than anybody else we've had. So just let me know.
Nice.
I've got Councilmember Druffel on, Councilmember Hancock is on, Councilmember Rutherford is on, Councilmember Hauser is on, school board members, the chair Christian Buggs is on, Frida Player is on. The whole city is watching. So, so I dressed up for the occasion.
Happy Saturday, everyone.
Happy Saturday. All right. So the way we usually start with this, I just ask you a general question. Tell me, I know you're from Nashville. Tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got to be in this illustrious position, particularly during pandemic. The floor is yours. Go ahead.
All right. Well, as you mentioned, native Nashvilleian, born and raised right here in Nashville, came through the ranks of MNPS. Anytime I talk about my early years and my experiences in MNPS, I always have to just give a shout out to all the wonderful teachers and educators and support staff, members of MNPS who really pushed me, my coaches as well, all those who pushed me and really inspired me to follow my dreams and what I wanted to be as I got older. And many of them knew that I really aspired to be at a very young age an educator. And so I thank them for just supporting me for my desires to live and breathe in this field. I went off to college to Missouri State University on a track and field scholarship. That's one of those little known facts that most people don't know. Previous student athlete and competed at the Division I level. Came back home, did my student teaching right here in Metro Nashville Public Schools. And as many of you know, I've served in many different capacities in MNPS, from teacher, coach, administrator, district administrator, previously a community superintendent over the Southeast Quadrant schools, and now the director of schools for Metro Nashville Public Schools. And it has definitely been a journey. I have embraced every role that I've had the pleasure of serving in MNPS, and don't take for granted that as I've kind of moved and navigated in those roles, the immense impact that I have and the capacity that I bring to the table to just support and reach many, many more students. And I am very proud of the educational opportunities I received as an MNPS student. And I want those same opportunities and experiences for all of our students, plus more, given that they all have their own desires, aspirations, and talents that we want to really tap into and make sure that they have paths for success.
All right, so I have two questions before we get into the main core of this stuff. The first is, what did you do? What kind of track and field did you do?
I, believe it or not, I started out in my early years as a sprinter. I ended up specializing as a middle distance runner. So the 800 meter, for all of you track folks out there who understand that's the new sprint of track and field. And I also competed in cross country in college.
Okay. Well, so I signed up to run the half marathon again this year, which has been pushed back to the fall. So I may need to talk to you because I've done them before. By about mile 10 or 11, I'm ready to stop.
Oh, I understand. And it's hard for me to participate in such events because my competitive edge kicks in, but I'm not in that competitive shape anymore. So it makes for a tough run as I'm battling the used to be space and training I was in.
Mine is not the competitive nature. Mine is more survival mode when I get to that. It's just trying to make it. And the second question I was going to ask is actually going to be your last question, but it's something to think about. So I was just thinking as you were talking. A number of people sent the same question in, and it's like, what can we do or our organizations can do for the school system? So that's going to be the last question at the end of this, but you can be thinking about it because we want you to succeed. We should be trying to figure out any way we can to help you succeed. So think about that, and that'll be the last question. Okay, 1 million questions. Let's start with the big one first. How do you reopen your school system safely? And then we'll get into some of the weeds on it, but generally, what a monumental task. What can you generally tell us about opening up the school systems and doing it as safely as possible?
Yes, that's a very timely and appropriate question. This has been one of the most challenging and most unique school years that we've experienced right here in MNPS, and that school districts have experienced all across the country. So we're not alone in the challenges, of course, with the tornado prior to the pandemic, and now our snowstorm this week. We can add a few more things to the need for us to navigate and safely reopen our schools. So, it's really about us keeping our priority where it needs to be, and that is the safety of everyone, the safety of our students, the safety of our employees, and the safety of their respective families. And so we've really tried to balance our approach with safety and speed, recognizing that the in-person learning environment and learning option can't be replaced. It is the most beneficial option for all of our students at the end of the day. And so we have tried to closely monitor where we are, both locally and, the impacts that we're seeing across the state and country with our COVID metrics. We started out this process really glued to the CDC guidelines, the advice of our local health experts and officials around planning for various scenarios. So if we take us back to March, if you all remember, we ended abruptly the end of the school year right after the third quarter of the school. We immediately went to remote learning and then went into our planning phase of planning for various scenarios in the fall. We did not know and could not anticipate where we would be in August. And so we planned for the in-person option, we planned for the virtual option, we planned for a combination of the two. We looked at every angle to see what would be feasible for us, given the access we had to the mitigation strategies and resources that would be needed to safely reopen. So we planned for those scenarios. Again, we looked at our mitigation strategies, our ability to provide and hold everyone accountable for mask wearing, for our ability around social distancing, our ability for other PPE for our staff, and scheduling for that matter. And this is all quite complex and it's really complicated. And I'm fortunate being a previous principal, having a very good understanding of what it takes in a normal school year to plan and to open safely. So as you all know, we started out the school year all virtual after giving our parents, which we were hopeful for, an option for in-person or virtual, but we had a spike in late July, which forced us to open all virtually. We were able to prioritize a number of our students entering into the in-person space in the fall, but then had to revert back to virtual learning after the Thanksgiving break, at which time we did release our COVID tracker in a very transparent and public way, posted on our website. To follow along with us daily as we looked at the metrics that we weren't creating, but just sharing based upon what was provided by the health department. So we've been very measured in our approach, really tracking the COVID tracker and waiting patiently while never losing sight of the planning and the expectation for our students to be in the in-person learning environment for us to return safely. So a few weeks ago, we were able to welcome our elementary students and exceptional education students back. Due to the snowstorm, we've had to push back the entrance and phase in for our 5th and 9th graders. That will happen this upcoming week. We'll continue on with our 6th through 8th and then our 10th through 12th grade students. But what's important here is that we have to measure our approach again around safety and speed. We can phase in too fast and then have to revert back to the virtual learning space. And that is definitely a space that we want to try to avoid for lots of reasons, for continuity of learning and instruction, for consistency for our kids, our students, and for our families. Our students have had to navigate a lot this year. And the last thing we need on top of all of the quarantining and isolation that will be required due to COVID, to have a sustainable learning environment for our students to continue to learn in. And again, we can go all the way into the weeds about how we're trying to social distance our students and how we're providing all of the PPE for students and teachers to just make sure that we have a safe learning environment. And as of today, our teachers will begin to be vaccinated. So we're really excited today that every MNPS employee who is interested in receiving the vaccine has had an opportunity to schedule their appointment so that they can very soon, starting today, get their shots so that we can continue to add that extra layer of support for our continuing option for in-person learning. That's
really good news. Tell me, so somebody asked a question about after-school workers, school bus drivers, everybody associated with the school system, all the staff. Vaccines, are they all in line to get vaccinated?
Absolutely. Every one of our K-12 teachers, our support staff, our bus drivers, nutrition services. If there's an organization that's a partner to MNPS providing services after school programming to our students, they're eligible. Our substitute teachers, we've tried to make sure that we've been in close communication with everyone who plays a critical role in educating and supporting our students.
And that's really, really good news. I'm glad to hear that. Okay, so a little bit into the weeds on the reopening, question about, particularly you're talking about middle school kids and high school kids. When I went to school 100 years ago, obviously kids changed classes when they got to that level. I know they still do that. How do you do that? How do you do that? Obviously with smaller kids, you can keep them sort of confined and keep them spaced out. How do you do that with middle and high school kids?
It's much more difficult. I will tell you that. I'm a previous elementary, middle, and high school principal. And all three of those spaces come with different needs, but also different opportunities. As you mentioned, in the elementary space, because we have more of a self-contained model in a lot of ways for elementary students, it's much easier to group them and to keep them in pods as much as possible during the school day. Middle school, it becomes a little more difficult to do because you begin to have specialized classes where certain licensures are required for teachers to teach those courses. But they do a little less transitioning than what you would see in high school. So in middle school, our approach is wherever we can, we will be grouping and podding students, reducing the number of transitions. But we know that we will 100% not be able to accomplish that because we have state requirements that we have to follow of who is really the instructor of the classroom, and the opportunity, we have opportunities for students to be on various paths towards their success given the courses that they're enrolled in. Then you move on to high school. Let me give a little context about high school. We have some high schools that are large as 2,500 students. And so when you're talking about social distancing, automatically what we do in convening 2,500 students goes against just the general premise of the social distancing idea. And so it will be very difficult for us to ensure the 6 feet of spacing between students, the ability to pod and group students, because every high school student has an individual schedule. They have an individual schedule. So that means that in a class of 35 in one block, in the first block, all 35 students, there's a possibility that they could all be going to a different teacher or a different course for a second block. So it makes it very difficult for podding. We also wanted to be very mindful about the balance of the being in the in-person setting and how much time our in-person students would spend on the asynchronous and synchronous learning platforms via technology. We will have to leverage those strategies quite a bit in high school, but we also wanted to balance that with the true high school experience and being able to learn directly from their specialized teachers and their classmates with how they will be learning through integrated forms via our technology platforms.
I'm listening to this and going like, what a challenge. What a challenge. Okay. All right, so on to the next question. Breakfast and lunch for kids, how do you do that?
Yes, another challenging area. And let's not forget that our students absolutely enjoy being with one another. And so that is going to be a challenge in itself because they've built friendships. Some as early as kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. They've made new friends while they've been in the virtual learning space. So that will pose just another challenge in kind of the discipline around the social distancing. But as you've mentioned, our schools, our principals, our school teams, our executive directors have been hard at work since this time last year, it seems, around how we would manage spaces like breakfast and lunch. And so wherever we can, we are making sure that we're doing things like breakfast or lunch in the classroom, leveraging outdoor spaces so students can spread out and so that we can clean appropriately. If you were to walk into many of our cafeterias, you will see that we have spaces blocked off to indicate where students can or cannot sit, just to encourage the social distancing, particularly because during breakfast and lunch, students will have to take off their masks to be able to eat and drink. So we're leveraging many different strategies, again, outdoors, in the classrooms, additional recreational spaces inside the buildings, and we are still utilizing our cafeterias in a lot of our schools. And this is all really dependent on the size of the school. And we've really empowered our school teams to take the best practices that we've provided and to create the best experience for our students so that they can still gather together, have breakfast, have lunch, but to be able to do it in a safe way.
Okay. Another obviously major challenge. Okay, now the third major challenge, transporting kids on buses or whatever. How do you do that?
Another challenging aspect, and Vice Mayor, what you're uncovering here are the many different areas that we've had to plan around. I mean, transportation is one of them. We run many of our buses on a daily basis. We utilize many of our buses to run both elementary, middle, and high school routes. And so the complexities and the cleaning and disinfecting there are also going to continue to be a challenge. We've been in training with our drivers for quite some time around the strategies we do want to deploy on our buses. While we are not able to get to a 1 student per seat approach, we are limiting the number of students on a seat. Now, whenever possible, if we can have 1, we're going for it. But we're trying to really space our students out to the best of our ability. In most cases, no more than 2 students per seat. We're utilizing strategies in where they sit on the seat to space them out from one row to the next. But our transportation team and our bus drivers have been fully trained on the communications around the mask wearing, assigned seats on the buses. We are going to assign seats as much as we can across buses, across all the buses in the district. We're also utilizing hand sanitizer on the buses and training our drivers around how to clean and disinfect their buses between routes. And so we've tried to be very mindful about that. But from the moment a student leaves their home, we've had to plan around how we can really layer in some of these mitigation strategies to reduce the spread of the virus and protect our students and staff.
Okay, well, while you're dealing with all those major issues, how do you protect your staff? And obviously you want to protect your kids too, you said that. But you know, does everybody get supplies? Everybody gets, you know, masks and personal protective equipment. How, you know, it's one thing to have kids at home and you've got them under control, but now you're merging all this stuff and they're in a classroom with a teacher. How do you not only protect your kids at that time, but you protect your staff?
Well, another great question, particularly for the in-person learning environment. Of course, there's less concern about that as we've been virtual, but some of the commitments that we've made to our staff and we've been executing around and will continue to do so as long as the virus is present in our community. We are providing all PPE for our staff. There is not a need or reason for them to have to purchase it on their own because our commitment is to provide it. We're also leveraging the state resources where our school teams can go in and request additional PPE for their staff members. We are also leveraging an accommodations process. It is something by law that we don't have to do, but because we're committed to the safety of everyone, our students and our staff, we're going through a very robust accommodations process so that our teachers can self-identify if there are any underlying concerns or issues or health concerns that we need to be made aware of so that we can accommodate them to the best of our ability to continue to keep them in a safe environment. So PPE, all the mitigation strategies that I've already mentioned, masks are required in our schools. Along with the accommodations to ensure that we're creating safe learning environments across every school, but also in every classroom for our employees.
Okay. All right. I think my last question in terms of the drill down, and then there were tons of questions that I'll get to, and we'll just do as many as we can. The cleaning of the classrooms, cleaning of the cafeteria, cleaning of the buses. more staff needed to do that? Have you got it the best way you can under control so that, you know, when kids return fully, or, you know, as this process starts kind of developing, that you've got the resources you need to keep the building clean and safe?
Well, I will say, in response to that, what we've tried to focus our efforts on is leveraging all of the resources, all of the leaders we have in MNPS to make that happen. So we have tried to be fully supportive of our team, who is leading the way with keeping our schools cleaned and disinfected. Our staff everyone has gone above and beyond, taking on roles and responsibilities that may not have been in their original job description, to make sure we're providing as safe as a learning environment as we can for all of our students. I think, you know, even prior to the pandemic, there was always a need for more to be able to do this in a more effective and efficient way. That need still continues, but we have focused on leveraging every resource we have to make sure that we can make the best possible situation with under the current circumstances.
Okay. And Dr. Battle, you know that we've got council members on this call, so it's a good time to be pitching more money for your school budget. Okay, just saying. All right.
Investments.
Okay. So let's get to some of these, just a series of questions. I wrote as many of them down as I could, tried to merge some of them. Let's go through some of them. Third graders and reading. Obviously, big concerns, this idea of if they're not at a certain level, they have to repeat. What's going on with that? And how do we, in such a difficult time, how do we get those kids reading to where they're supposed to be? Or are we just kind of stuck this year? And there may not be a right answer, I know, but third graders and reading. Tell us about that.
Yes, first and foremost, you know, this has been a challenging school year for everyone. There are certainly difficulties presented by this pandemic for the education of our children. And so that's something that we recognize, and it's required more from everyone. I mean, even our parents who've been supporting their students at home as we remain mostly virtual this school year. I do want to caution us about, I know there's been lots of conversations, particularly around learning loss. And what we're in the process of doing right now is getting a better understanding of where our students are. And so we're really focusing on the learning progress of our students, identifying where they are and what it's going to take to move them forward. But to suggest that our students have not benefited from the great teaching and learning that I know I've seen and experienced with our staff during the virtual learning experience would be inaccurate. I mean, there's been lots of teaching and learning happening in the virtual learning space. Yes, there have been some gaps that have widened, but not to the degree that has been reported most recently. And so what we are anticipating based upon some early data, we've just finished our second round of our MAP assessment, which is our formative assessment we use in-house. We're seeing that for the most part, students have been able to maintain their growth in reading and ELA. We've seen a slight decline in performance with regards to numeracy. And so our focus efforts right now are identifying where each individual student is in their path towards success and meeting and exceeding their grade level standards, and what it's going to take in order to accelerate them, because we don't want our students just to maintain just minimum growth. We want to make sure we're accelerating that on behalf of all of our students. So it will continue to be a concern for us. Literacy is still one of our priorities as a district when it comes to our focus outcomes and how we are deliberately and intentionally investing in that space. So those efforts will continue, but I just want to call out it's what we're seeing right now as far as the gaps widening. It's not as alarming as what's being reported. Still lots of work to do. So I want to underscore that with that, it will require needed investments and attention and the community plugging in and partnering to make sure that every single student is on track for their grade level standards.
Okay, so let me ask you, go back to the, particularly because I think most people, you know, when you just kind of get the general sense of what's being reported is that there's this, that particularly just focused on third graders for right now, they're struggling, they're falling behind, and that gap to where they should be is just widening. But you're saying it's not as bad as what we keep hearing. Combine that with the question about how do you assess? You talked about assessing to figure out where we are. Mm-hmm. How are you doing that so that we do get a better, a more clear, transparent picture of kind of where we are, particularly during this horrible situation?
Yes, and we're using the resources and assessments that we currently have at our disposal. Back in the fall, early on, we did administer our first round of our MAP assessment. That's typically when it happens. We, this year, had to administer it virtually. We were able to capture a lot of good data that we can use, but we also know that we had some challenges in it being administered in the virtual space. We know that, as far as training and awareness around how much proctoring and facilitation that the students should have, particularly at our grade levels, was new to most of our earlier grade students and our families. And so we've been able to kind of flag that data to determine where we may have had some additional support in student outcomes. We took our learnings from that first fall assessment and trained and planned for months before we administered again in January. And in January, we again released it with lots of supports, professional development, awareness for our families, our students, our staff around how to properly administer what we call our MAP assessment. And so early indications are that one, we were able to assess many more students than we did in the fall. And that two, as our research assessment and evaluation team has been analyzing the data, it is much more in line to what we would have predicted for student performance. And so we're continuing to leverage MAP assessments across the district, but we cannot also forget the importance of teacher created and classroom-based assessment. So we're encouraging our teachers to not only use our MAP assessments to determine how to adjust instruction right now, but also their own assessments and their own data to meet the individual needs of our students. Okay,
all right. So morph that question in terms of how you're doing the assessment. Some of the questions were about more underrepresented students, students of diversity. Let's talk about students that particularly English is a second language. How is that going? Obviously, you're saying overall we seem to be, particularly on the third grade reading stuff, not as that gap is closer. What about particularly those kids that were further behind or may have been further behind at the beginning? Has that gap grown? And then if it has, or even if it hasn't, in a pandemic or coming out of a pandemic, how do we start fixing that?
Yeah, another great question. I think we should, across all of these data points, expect that there will be some slight gaps that are there, whether that's ELA given the specific subgroups or with numeracy. With our exceptional education students and with our English learners, we know that prior to the pandemic, there were additional supports and needs for their students. And so we have adjusted our programming and instruction to the best of our ability in the in-person learning to still provide those quality learning experiences. But what you're alluding to here is what we've been hard at work around for the last few months. We have just recently launched what we call our core tenets as a district, our focus outcomes, which is what we expect for every student given the respective grade level of that student, and how we're going to make sure that we're meeting the needs of our students and accelerating their outcomes. So for instance, even going back to the third grade reading question that you have, which also has indications in this space around our exceptional education students and our English learners, is in the next few weeks, we're going to be launching a new literacy framework. This framework outlines what we will be doing as a district now and in the future to elevate the literacy skills of our students. And our initial framework will cover grades K through 5. It is redefining what literacy looks like in MNPS. what resources will be required, the required professional learning for our educators, and what students can expect to experience and parents can expect to experience on a daily basis, given the literacy needs of our students. And so in response to that, we are releasing this new literacy framework because we recognize, again, a combination of what we knew already prior to the pandemic, what now has been elevated through the pandemic, and what's going to be needed to move us forward into the future, ensuring that every single student, because our tagline is every student known, so we must know where every student is to provide the quality instructional experiences and opportunities necessary for our general education students, for our exceptional education students, for our English learners, for our third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders. We have outlined it in that regard to make sure that we're all on one accord in MNPS around what it's going to take for us to get there. And so I know we have several council members and board members on the call today. What you can expect to hear in the next few weeks around our budget conversations are, needed investments to help us accelerate these learning experiences for our students. Literacy is a part of the plan, numeracy is a part of the plan, social emotional learning, the mental health needs of our students, all a part of the plan. And we're so excited that one of our other signature initiatives, they all fall under our signature initiative bucket, is that we're going to be launching a personalized student dashboard so that students, parents, our staff are all empowered with 24/7 access to where students are and what it's going to take from all of us in partnership to get them to where they need to be.
I'm getting ready to applaud you. Okay, so and there were a number of amens coming across the chat screen. Okay, so very, very good. Very excited about this. And I know that our education chair, Tom Druffel's on this call, and I'm requesting that he follow up with Christian Buggs as the school board chair to relay information back to the council to help, okay? Which includes not only just either staying out of your way and letting you all do it, or, pushing for additional resources or what we can do to be helpful, okay? Very good. Let me ask you another question. Distance learning, which has been really very, very interesting. And school board member John Little just joined, okay? Distance learning, the digital divide. Can you see improvements with that as kids have had to stay at home and getting access to the new technology? Is that improving? Is that getting better?
I think this is a place that we can celebrate across the board. So first, I have to give a huge thank you to Metro Council, to the mayor for the first, it was an investment right off the bat, as soon as we knew we were going to be relying on remote learning. Because of the investment and the partnership and commitment from Metro Council and the mayor, we have been able to purchase and get into the hands of our students a device in a one-to-one fashion. So we have the technology in a one-to-one structure for every MNPS student. We also, because of our great partnership, have the connectivity. So we have hotspots for every MNPS student who needs one and family who needs one. That is exciting. It is something that, again, I'm a longtime MNPS employee. It is something that we have desired for a long, long time. And so we were able to realize that this school year. So let me put this plug out there. If you hear of a conversation or a family who does not have a device, does not have connectivity, please connect them with us. We have it ready to go for our students. And so this has been a space that we have been able to elevate. I will tell you that having that increase doesn't mean that we didn't have challenges along the way, because part of that kind of abrupt shift meant that we didn't necessarily have the previous time to train and make sure that all the technical support was in place. And so we had our bumps along the way of making sure that we could walk all of our students and families through how to get onto the device and how to access their learning platforms. But we have come a long way. Part of our response to that as a district was the launching of our virtual help centers. And it's probably, it's one of our signature initiatives that we're looking to expand as we move into the future. And that is allowing more space and more support out and about in the community. Those sites right now are in our schools to meet on demand the needs of our students and families if they run into any technical difficulties while they're utilizing our platform and the devices. Another huge win is that we were able to replace and upgrade our teacher devices and get devices into the hands of our support personnel who's needed it. So we will continue to pay attention to that. Part of being a one-to-one district means that we now need to be planning for the refresh cycle with those devices. And we do have created a comprehensive technology plan that speaks to the needs for refreshing those devices over time, what the curriculum integration will look like, because we will continue to integrate technology into our instruction, even as we move past this pandemic. So we're looking at that across the board and all the professional development that will be required to make sure that we're leveraging these tools that we now have in our hands to the best of our ability.
So, and I think that was some of the questions showed up about post-pandemic, which we can actually now start a little bit talking about, because we're, that light is somewhere at the end of the tunnel and it's getting a little brighter and we're getting closer. So post-pandemic, you're talking about the digital connection now. Tell me, as we're trying to deal with this current situation, the focus on the future, post-pandemic, and even starting with people asking about summer school, just to help. Summer school, is that going to be a possibility? And then what do we, as we come out of this, I know I have some more questions to come back to, but as we come out, what are you all looking at?
Exciting question here, Vice Mayor. We have, again, we've been responsive to the pandemic. We have not lost sight of the future either. And that's been necessary and required of us. We are not to be distracted by what it's going to take to get our students where they need to be by the time they graduate from Metro Nashville Public Schools. So as I mentioned, again, very exciting work. Earlier last month, we have launched our plan to address what we've experienced for now and in the future. And as you've heard me mention, we have released our core tenets, which are that we're re-envisioning central office as a support hub. We're making sure that central office is coordinating our efforts to the unique needs of each individual school in our district, given the students that they represent. We're focusing on equipping and empowering our leaders at all levels. It does not matter which seat an MNPS employee sits in, they are a leader. And we need to make sure that they're empowered to lead, but they have the tools necessary, the resources necessary, and the training necessary to really leverage and maximize their talents on behalf of our students. Our third one is that we're creating engaging, supporting, and personalized learning experiences for all of our MNPS students. And you've heard me talk about my experience as an MNPS student, so this is near and dear to my heart. And as a previous principal and classroom teacher, I know that's what it takes to move all of our students forward. And the fourth one is that we are working on identifying and eliminating inequities all across our district, not just at the district level, but in every school and every classroom. We're working very diligently to eliminate those inequities. Those are tied to our focused outcomes. We've identified what we expect for every student without excuse around literacy performance, numeracy performance, social emotional learning, meaning their competencies, their attendance rates for engagement. And we're also focused on transitions for our students, making sure that they have proper plans as they transition from one grade to the next and on to post-secondary and into their careers. Now, speaking to the very specific strategies, our signature initiatives are how we're going to accomplish this. So one of them in particular that you've mentioned is how we've been planning for summer. And I want to be very clear, we've been planning for summer for quite some time, many months in advance of the special committee bill that came out a couple weeks ago around summer learning. We have what we're going to be calling our Promising Scholars summer learning opportunities this summer. And that's to encompass students in grades pre-K through 12. We're already planning around that. And so we're looking forward to providing a robust summer learning program that is engaging for our students, that is fun for our students, that is personalized for our students, and not more of the same. We're having to take a pause right now to go back and make sure that we're meeting all the requirements that have just been passed through the legislature in that regard, but we were already planning for our Promising Scholars Academy because we want to make sure that we don't leave any student at the finish line in May, and that we continue to support our students to make sure they're making they are achieving their focused outcomes prior to the next academic year. Those signature initiatives also encompass one of our, again, exciting ones around high dosage tutoring. We've already launched our high dosage tutoring program. We'll be matching students based upon their need to tutors based upon their needs. So in the elementary space, we're focusing on literacy. In the middle school space, we're focused on numeracy, and in high school, we will have a combination of the two. And this is all based upon data that we've seen and conversations that we've had with multiple stakeholders. So this is a call to the community. If you are interested in supporting MNPS, we can use tutors. We have a very robust onboarding program now in partnership with Vanderbilt with their Bright Path, tutoring with Pencil to make sure that we can onboard and train you. We just need you to be willing to support our students. We'll provide you with the tools you need to support our students in their high dosage tutoring, much of which will happen during the school day, during students' personalized learning time. We're also launching in the numeracy space a coaching with Khan model. Many of you might be familiar with Khan Academy. It does not replace our core instruction. It will be additional supports made available for students to have access and opportunities to practice their mathematical skills based on where they are, because we're able to align where they are with MAP, with Khan Academy, and we're doing additional training with our teachers around numeracy, leveraging the Khan Academy model. So lots of strategies that we're already in the process of deploying. So you have a school district right here in your city who's not waiting for the last positive COVID test or the last shot in the arm. We are working right now in launching our strategies, including our personalized dashboard to meet the individual needs of our students, because that is what is going to take in order for us to ensure that every student is moving along. And as I've mentioned earlier, in alignment to our tagline, that it is going to require every student being known. That is what our parents are requiring of us. That's what they need. That's what our students deserve.
Okay. So tell me, that leads into some questions people had next school year. So you're talking about these innovative ideas, budget. So you obviously you've got some council members on the call. You've got school board members on the call. I don't want to overstep in terms of, I know that you have to go talk to the mayor, but I think this is an opportunity for you to kind of tell us, how do we, obviously lots of new initiatives, but I assume they come with a cost. How do we make this work? How do we do this?
It will take continued advocacy. It will take continued investments. And let me be clear, my school board has done a magnificent job of coming together and identifying the budget priorities for MNPS as we're moving forward. And based upon their recommendations and approval of those budget priorities, my administration, our team are hard at work in aligning these strategies and the necessary investments it will take to move things forward. So we do need those investments in dollars, but we also need investments in general advocacy about the great things that are happening in MNPS. We need them in regards of volunteerism tutoring and reading to our students. We need advocacy towards the state with regards to our BEP formula. I will leave that one there, but it will take all of those conversations, all of the communications and partnerships in a concerted effort to make sure we're able to realize what we know it will take to move our students forward. And we have a district full of, and you've been hearing this number, 14,000 employees who are experts, who knows what it takes to provide these quality experiences for our students. And if there was ever a time to invest, it is now. We need true investments. We're very thankful for the capital improvement budget that the mayor has released. And I know there's more to do in that space, but I'm very encouraged by the proposed investment in our schools to make sure that we can provide these quality experiences that we all desire and want for every student in Nashville.
Okay. Somebody had asked a question about, well, about legislators. I'll add the council to it, relationship to the school board. You know, a while back, we saw the school board more in the news than probably we would like to, for reasons other than, you know, focusing on education. Kudos to the school board at this point. They seem, you know, obviously there's always struggles, just like with the council, but it seems to be that people are sort of aligning. The question that we got was, are legislators and public officials pestering you and driving you crazy? You can pick on the council if you want. We try not to pester anybody, but I'm sure we're guilty of it. But relationships with the school board and with the council and legislators.
Yeah, I actually think this is a very bright spot. I mean, as you've mentioned, our school board chair, Christian Buggs, she is on the call. Good morning, Ms. Buggs. I am very appreciative of the work that Ms. Buggs is leading alongside all of our school board members. We have just been committed to limit distractions, to keep us focused on the focus, which should be our students at the end of the day. So I've been encouraged by those conversations, and every conversation, every planning time we spend, the road leads right where it needs to. So I've been very grateful and thankful for my partnership with the school board and their leadership during this space, because it has been challenging for everyone. And where we may have missed the boat, I just believe as we continue to stay focused and bring everything back to the center, we will continue to do what's best for our students in representing our district extremely well. I am so excited about many of the joint conversations that we're having with Metro Council. We've already had a few around budget. We have a few coming up around HR, human resources, and social emotional learning. I know that our vice chair, Ms. Rachel Ann Elrod, has been leading those efforts. So I'm extremely proud of that. I think those are perfect opportunities to engage, to connect, and to be responsive to the questions and the wonderings that council may have. And so I haven't felt any pestering in that regard. I've really felt a concerted effort of partnership to make sure that we all know what's needed and why it's needed in order to move our district forward. So it's been, to me, very productive, particularly over the last year as we've been navigating so many other challenges that, quite frankly, have been out of our control.
Yeah. Well, and I know our chairman, Tom Druffel, has sent a message to the chat box. We want to be helpful. We don't want to pester. We need to be helpful, and this is a great call to encourage our council members to work with the school board folks and be very, very helpful if we can. Okay, just a couple other quick questions, and then I'm going to get to my last question because we've got about 5 minutes. A lot, and you've gone through this, but the resources to help students as we come out of the pandemic, and you've talked about quite a bit of that, but anything specific else that you want to mention for kids that did struggle, learning some emotional issues, that type of stuff, specific resources to help kids?
I'm happy to speak to that space. One of our focus outcomes is around social emotional learning and the mental health needs of our students. And if you all could journey back with me a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were already in the space of needing increased supports for our students. We are advocating around some best practices and strategies that MNPS has learned from. And so we have some strategies that we are looking to take to scale, some that are very familiar to many of you on this call. Everything from our community achieves model and sites, very much needed across our district. And I'll take you back to some data with regards to our priority schools a few years ago. The schools that did exit from priority school status, one thing that we were able to acknowledge and celebrate is that all of them were community achieved schools. So they had that level of support in their schools, someone who was able to align the schools to the pillars of community achieve and align volunteers, the community, the school staff around all their efforts to maximize each and every one of them to realize positive outcomes for students. So that is one space. Also, we have in years past had some transition out of our mental health supports directly in our schools. And I'm an advocate as much as possible to get resources directly in schools. Again, being a previous teacher, an administrator, I know how critical it is to be able to immediately address the needs of students. When we're not able to do that, they're compounded by day-to-day interactions, time outside of the school or the classroom. And so we will be advocating around getting additional mental health providers and supports directly in each one of our MNPS schools. We're also pushing for and advocating around our advocacy centers in our schools so that every school has a care specialist, much like if you visited Warner Elementary School lately, they have a Be Well room. It is a space where it's paying dividends over and over again because students get individual time, but then students begin to build the capacity around how to self-regulate and understanding that resources are available to them if they find themselves in a need, in a space for additional wraparound supports. This also elevates our ability to identify needs of our students through our counselors. We're focusing on reducing the counselor to student ratio for direct supports, but also those additional roles that I've just spoke about are able to directly connect students and families to resources. And so that is a need that we continue to see for our students. We have also not lost sight of the mental health needs and supports for our employees as well. So through our Employee Wellness Center, through collaborations, we have some with the state as well. We're making sure that everyone has genuine access to supports and that they are not delayed, given in most cases the immediate response that is needed.
Okay. Two quick technical questions. Somebody asked about grades this year on permanent records. Kids end up failing because of problems or whatever. Are the grades permanent? Do they have to take the classes back? Do we know? Can you answer that one?
Yes, so Teaching and Learning School has been in session since the start of August. What we've been doing internally is training and kind of prepping all of our school staff around the additional efforts and supports that should be in place for our students. For instance, we launched our Navigators program where we've assigned one adult to every single student to check in with them to make sure that we're being responsive to their needs. We will continue efforts, like I mentioned, with our signature initiatives around tutoring and Khan Academy, Promising Scholars. So we're going to leverage every tool and resource we have to ensure that our students are successful. So I would also just kind of plug, if there are any parents who are thinking about summer already, please know that MNPS will be offering a robust summer learning program. And if you've heard the term Promising Scholars, that will be the umbrella under which we'll be launching summer learning programs for all students, including credit recovery, particularly at the secondary level.
Okay. Last technical question, the percentage of kids coming back versus those that are staying virtual, do you know at this point what that number looks like, at least right now?
Currently, we have about 45%, approximately 45% of our students who have selected to remain in the virtual learning environment. And so our commitment to our families, regardless of if they chose the in-person option or the virtual option, we're giving you the same experiences, opportunities, efforts, regardless of the preference of the family. So families, rest assured that just because we're in the phase in, we're not going to abandon our virtual students. And just because students are phasing in doesn't mean that we're going to lose focus of all of their needs. We're going to put a concerted effort in both spaces to make sure our students have, again, the opportunities, the supports they need, and access to a staff to be responsive to them as they navigate the remainder of the school year.
All right, I'm trying to get in my last question, but people keep sending great questions. And if you've got questions, obviously you can send them in to Dr. Battle. You can send them to me and I'll get them to Dr. Battle. Somebody asked about measuring your new strategic initiatives. Obviously, you want to make sure that they're working. Process is set up as you unveil these things to make sure that you're measuring to see how well they're working. I assume you've got that in place.
Absolutely. We will continue to progress monitor where we are with our signature initiatives. The board and myself will continue to engage on a weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, around where we are. I think the reality is, because we're launching 14 signature initiatives in response, there will be some that will go off without a hitch, and there will be some that we'll have to really leverage our continuous improvement model to adapt and adjust based upon the needs and the outcomes that we're experiencing.
Okay. Last question. The first one I asked you. We want you to be successful. We want kids to be successful. We want, we want this to work. Everybody on this call, the message that what can we and what can our organizations and everything else, I know what the council can do, but what can we do to help make this all succeed?
Perfect way to end. Let me start with this, and I know we're right at time. Yeah. If you ever wondered, questioned, if we want your partnership, if we want your advocacy, or you having the ability to volunteer in Metro Nashville Public Schools, wonder no more, question no more. We need you. We need strong partnerships. We need strong leaders. We need strong mentors for our students. You literally cannot do too much of it. So the continued advocacy around investments, Vice Mayor, as you've already mentioned, we are launching the state-of-the-art high dosage tutoring program. We need volunteers, we need tutors. We will work with your schedules as needed based upon in alignment to our student needs. We need mentors for our students. We will continue to launch our mentor program, particularly through our Promising Scholars. Read Me Week is coming up. Pick a school, read to a group of students. Do not underestimate the power of our students seeing you as leaders who look like them, you as leaders, parents who are embracing the work of MNPS around literacy. We need you. So if you have a question about how to plug in, how to connect with MNPS, please feel free to reach out to me. I know our school board members would be happy to connect you as well. If you don't have my contact information, but my email, directorofschools@mnps.org. We'll be happy to get you connected to the right place. We also have a place on our website to the Get Involved tab. Will take you exactly where you need to our Director of Community Engagement and Community Achieve, which is Allison MacArthur. Reach out to Pencil. Pencil does a fabulous job of onboarding and connecting our volunteers, our city leaders to opportunities in MNPS. We need you. We stand ready to partner with you, and we're working as diligently as we can to eliminate any barriers to our success in partnering.
So we are out of time. I'm so proud of you. We are so fortunate to have you as the director of our school system. I am so appreciative of what you have had to go through over the last year. And I know that you've got some more of this. And then once you get out of this pandemic, you've already got such a critical and important role. But you've inspired me. I think you've inspired everybody else. We want to help you make this work. Thank you for giving up an hour of your Saturday morning. So proud of what you're doing. Keep up the great work and let us know how we can help. And everybody on this call, There are things that are showing up on the chat box about how to get involved. Now's the time. Let's do this. We are, if you want to watch this again, it'll be up on YouTube, on my website, or wherever it is. I have no idea what that is. On Monday, watch this, share this with people. Let's do this. We'll be back on next week. Dr. Battle, again, thank you. Stay safe. Tell your staff, your teachers, your students, stay safe, and we're with you. Okay.
And one last thing, if you get a chance, thank a teacher, encourage them. They have been going above and beyond and want the best for our students. So our teachers, our support staff, our bus drivers, nutrition services, any MNPS employee, please thank them and continue to encourage them to keep pushing and providing for our students.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for that. Everybody be safe. Dr. Battle, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay. All right. We'll see everybody next week. So long.